her name is Dr. Fatima Rajina. She is a lecturer at the Stephen Lawrence Research Centre at De Montfort University. And she's actually done her PhD. And it's really, really fascinating because it's all about the British Bangladeshi community, especially in the East End. And she's just published a book, which it's here. Here, guys, this is the book. Do go out and get it. But she's here, and I really want to speak to her about it. So hi and welcome.
Hi, Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good.
This is, honestly, I think it's really fascinating. I know we were speaking, behind the scenes, but, you've obviously done a PhD on this. I just want to get your story, really, and what made you do this and what it's about for people to know. So obviously you decided that you wanted to focus on, the Muslims, the Bangladeshi Muslims in the UK.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about what that entailed and how long it took? And what the current themes were?
Yeah. So the scholarship, once I secured the scholarship, which in itself came as a shock because scholarships are very competitive. So when I secured it, I thought, okay, let me start reading a bit more. And initially, I wanted to look at dress, language, and food. So I wanted to look at 3 items. But then I was told by my supervisor it would be too much for one thesis. So she said, pick 2. So I thought, oh my God, which 2? And I thought, you know what, let's go for dress and language and stick to that and see. So ultimately the themes, these are the 2 core themes of the book. And I go into the detail of looking at how the Bangladeshi community has changed its relationship to dress and language. So just to give you some examples, so with dress, I look at, for example, how people's Bangladeshi men's relationship has changed with the Longi and the Punjabi. So I look at that. And I interviewed 43 people for this book. And I look at the change in how that has then shifted to the thobe, the growing of the beard. With Bangladeshi women, I look at the sari and the shalwar kameez and how that shifted to the jilbab, the hijab, the niqab. And then with language, I look at how there's been a shift in how, in the East End, you used to have those old school supplementary schools where, they used to be called fora. After school, you went to fora. Fora was usually split, where half of it was you had to learn Bangla, the other half was learning Arabic. Whereas that doesn't really exist anymore. It's usually just, people will say fora jaydam or, madrasa jaydam khonami. That's usually what you hear people saying. So I look at these transitions and the change in language, but I also look at how fewer Bengalis learn Bangla actively and are more willing to learn Arabic, so they sign up to Arabic institutions. So it's no longer that Muslims, Bangladeshi Muslims just want to learn Arabic for the purposes of recitation. They actually want to be able to speak the language and directly understand what they're reading. And what was really interesting and striking is I looked at code switching, and what I found fascinating about Bangladeshi Muslims here in the East End is that they, for example, in Bengali we say namaj for prayer. We say jai namaj for the prayer mat. So when I was interviewing a lot of people, they said, well, it depends who I'm with that I use those terms. So if they're with other Bangladeshi Muslims or other South Asian Muslims, they use these terms of, oh, it's time to do namaz now, guys. So let's start praying. But when as soon as that switches to a space where they have sort of other Muslims, so non-South Asian Muslims in their presence, they switch to Arabic. So they see Arabic as the lingua franca for Muslims because everyone knows Salah. Oh, it's Salah time now, guys. So I look at, those are the things that are the core themes that I look at.
It's so interesting because obviously I can sit here and just think about my own family and if I think about the observations I've made since I was a young kid, I've seen a lot of women who, didn't wear hijab or just wore salwar kameez or saris, and it's evolved to abayas. What's the reason that this has happened?
I mean, it's really interesting because so when I'm analysing these changes, I'm obviously looking a lot at the socio-political changes that have happened over the years. So I mean, even up until the sort of late 90s, early noughties, you found that the shalwar kameez was associated with you're unmarried. It was almost like a sign in the public of your availability that find out who this girl's parents are. And then the sari was seen as the rite of passage into womanhood, and you wore the sari as a married woman, you know, and if people came to your house, you know, you took the asol, you put it on your head. You know, there was a respectability that you had to also play with socially, depending on the context. But obviously 9/11 happens in 2001, and that suddenly brings the Muslim subject to people's attention of, you have this Muslim community, they behave in this way, they're violent, they're aggressive, and, you know, terrorism and all these things came about that a lot of us obviously know about. And in the British context, when 7/7 happens, that further entrenches a lot of these ideas of the scary Muslim. And while that was happening, what I called within the dominant narrative of at a sort of top level, what that was then trickling down at the bottom level is that people were then feeling like, hold on a second, like, I never really grew up thinking of myself primarily as a Muslim. I saw myself as doing all these things, all these things matter to me equally. But suddenly, because religion was being used as a way to surveil this particular community, obviously I studied, people then felt like, hold on a second, that's not what Islam is about. I never grew up with that. That's not what my grandparents taught me, my parents. So people then ended up using the very identity that was being attached to so much stigma as a way to push back, saying, no, that's not what we're about. So that's how people then adopted a lot of the wearing of the hijab, the jilbab, niqab, and with men you saw the sort of beard appearing, wearing of the thobe became very prevalent and very prominent even now when you just pay attention to you know, during Jummah even, you know, you see it.
And look, I totally get it. And I remember when it was 9/11, I was 18 years old. And to be honest, before that, I didn't look in the mirror and think, I'm brown, I'm Muslim, I'm Bangladeshi. I was just me, you know, doing my everyday things. And then all of a sudden after 9/11, you did have to look in the mirror and think, okay, this is who, because of the media who are portraying people as they're the wrong ones, the bad ones, and you start questioning your own identity. But talking about the Bangladeshi community in general, do you feel like our culture has been diluted in some ways through this?
I mean, it really depends on, again, who you're speaking to, because I feel like, what do we mean by dilution? What is it we even consider as culture, right? And obviously I'm saying that as a sociologist because I look at these things very critically and how they evolve and they change and they shape, you know, they shift and it takes a different shape and form. But I mean, you know, obviously Boishaki Mela was a big thing, for example, and lots of Bengali newspapers. But now, for example, you're seeing the growth of the Italian Bengali community who are actually, you know, for example, they're the ones who are reading a lot of the Bangla newspapers now, and they're very much becoming a significant demographic now, who are shifting some of the ways we, you know, talk about the Bangladeshi community, because they're adding these new dynamics and running cafes where you see Bengali uncles now making espresso shots, you know, for their customers, which is quite a unique aesthetic and visual in itself, because, you know, we're a Sa people, right? We drink tea. So now you're seeing these uncles making espresso. So I think a culture, I guess it depends how you see it, but if you're talking about its prevalence in the public through clothes, which is obviously what I look at, and language, well, language you still hear. You obviously still hear Sylheti on the streets of Tower Hamlets, for example, and you hear you know, there's still translation services available, GCSE Bangla is still available. But with regards to dress, that has definitely drastically shifted, because you don't see the sari, you know, for example, Sassis wearing saris to Whitechapel Market to do their shopping, or even like other big shops, you know, cash and carry shops, or the shalwar kameez. The very few people who are still wearing it are usually the Bangladeshis who've come here as students or on student visas and working in the area. So I think because they're exposed to a different kind of political dynamic and expectations compared to British Bangladeshis, who are obviously exposed to different sociopolitics.
So those aunties you're talking about who are walking the streets of Whitechapel or whatever, what did you find by speaking with them? What was their reason? Was it a religious reason, or was it because ultimately they are Bangladeshis, right?
Yeah, I mean it varied. Really, the responses varied. So for some it was things have changed. You know, Jabanabod ligase, finda lagbo. But I do want to emphasize that, you know, respectability played out in other ways with the sari and shalwar kameez. So when you were a young girl and, you know, unmarried and you wore the shalwar kameez, kameez uruna hamesha rakha lagse, you know, because that was a form of respectability you had to abide by and perform socially. And then when you became a married woman, you had to perform that in a different way with your sari, with your asol, making sure your head is covered, dawat tilak, you know, you have to do all these kind of things, right? We always have to participate in these social, you know, performances, right, that we have to do because we have to abide by particular etiquettes, mannerisms, and that's just now shifted to the hijab and jilbab and niqab, and because I had some people that I interviewed who spoke about, you know, if you go for a dekha-dekhi to see a girl, you know, for marriage, there is an expectation if she doesn't wear the hijab, je biyarba definda lagbo, matar khafro finda lagbo. So because, you know, and when I spoke to some of them in more detail, and one of them I do cite in the book, you know, he pretty much insinuates it's to do with respectability. You know, aro manche সম্মান দিবা family re jodi bou matha khafru findu. So I think it's religious, but it's also to do with a lot of manche kita hoiba. So it's shifted from the sari shalwar kameez.
Honestly, it's very interesting, and we are running out of time. So I just want to talk about the cover of this, because it is absolutely beautiful. Can you just talk me through this?
I will do. So it was designed and put together by the incredible Wahida Rahman Mer, who is a Bengali illustrator in Birmingham. And if you just show it to the camera again, it basically captures the hustle and bustle of Brick Lane. You know, the sasa with his lati and his mendi beard. There's a man negotiating in a longi. The lao. You know, there's a woman who's just carrying her shopping. There's a woman in a sari. So it was supposed to capture that hustle and bustle of Brick Lane, of the East End, and just how much we have shaped so much of the East End's history, and we're in the history books and the archives, and I just wanted to capture that in the book cover.
Well, look, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in. I feel like I can speak to you for hours. We should have a cup of tea afterwards.
We can do.
Honestly.